Will the Sony a7CR actually have 8K video? Will it have the same 4-axis articulating LCD found in the Sony a7R5? And what about the Sony a7C II? Well, stick around after this short break for all the details. But first, please do me a favor. Follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, but most importantly, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, it really helps get this channel noticed, and it keeps you up to date on the latest camera gear, news, and rumors. Sony Alpha Rumors posted a correction this morning stating that the Sony a7CR won't have 8K video. And we'll get to the Sony a7CR in just a moment, but first, let's do a recap of the latest specifications for the Sony a7C II. Now it is going to have an improved autofocus system. It's going to have the autofocus system found in the Sony a7R5. And for that to happen, it's also going to have that AI processing unit. It's going to have the 33 megapixel sensor found in the Sony a7 IV. And of course, it's going to have a Bionz XR image processor. I did say that correct. I was going to say something else. In my head, I said something else, and I'm glad it came out correctly. But let's revisit the AI processing unit. Because in this camera, we've got several AI-based capabilities, and one of the ones that Sony Alpha Rumors has teased us about is AI framing. So if you'll recall, the Sony ZV-E10, it has AI framing, similar to what Apple has in their FaceTime. So if you're doing something like this, you're shooting in a studio setting, you're moving around like this, well, it's going to frame, keep you centered up, and I think that's pretty cool. But for pros, I get it, it's not something we would necessarily use, but consider the marketplace for this camera. The Sony a7C II is going to have the exact same LCD found in the Sony a7 IV. So it's not going to have that 4-axis fully articulating flip screen that we see in the Sony a7R5. It's going to have image stabilization, both digital and 5-axis image stabilization. And in terms of continuous shooting, no surprises here. We've seen this in a lot of Sony cameras, 10 frames per second. But now for the video specifications. The Sony a7C II is going to have 4K video at 24, 25, and 30 frames per second, all the basic frame rates, as well as 50 and 60 frames per second. No mention about 120 frames per second, whether that's possible in 1080 or 720, but definitely not possible in 4K. But now let's get to that point that we're all kind of hemming and hawing about a little bit. Now keep in mind, this camera is supposed to be priced around $2,000. So for it to have a single card slot, I get it, it's still a little bit annoying. I'd expect at this price point to at least have 2 card slots and just make them SD card slots, not CF Express Type A. But according to Sony Alpha Rumors, we're just getting a single card slot on the Sony a7C II. What about the Sony a7CR? Well, we're going to cover that now. So the Sony a7CR is rumored to be, well, I've kind of coined this phrase, a mini Sony a7R5, because Sony Alpha Rumors has said that a lot of the capabilities in this camera are found in the Sony a7R5. But the one big correction, let's get it out of the way, even though it has a 61 megapixel backside illuminated sensor, full frame sensor, it's not going to be able to shoot 8K video. Initially, yesterday, Sony Alpha Rumors said it was going to be able to shoot 8K video, but there was a miscommunication between the source. And whenever you're talking about rumors, there's always going to be a bit of broken telephone. So no 8K video on the Sony a7R5, sorry, on the Sony a7CR. I keep getting these two mixed up. You're going to see that they're very similar cameras. In terms of image processor, Bionz XR image processor, it's going to have, no surprises here, guess which chip? Yep, the AI processing unit, and it's going to have other AI capabilities. Now, there's no mention if it's going to have that AI framing that the a7C II has, but it's likely going to have other capabilities that help it stand out. So the same autofocus system found in the Sony a7R5. But what is really big here is that it's going to have the exact same LCD found in the Sony a7R5. Yes, that 4-axis LCD fully articulating makes everybody happy. I really wish this would be the standard. I hope this comes in the Canon EOS R5 Mark II and the Canon EOS R1. But that's not the only thing that the Sony a7CR is going to have in common with the Sony a7R5. It's going to have the exact same IBIS system, 5-axis IBIS, and it's going to be able to shoot at 10 frames per second continuous shooting. Now let's take a look at the video specifications. So this is where things do separate a little bit from the Sony a7R5. So again, no 8K video. It's going to top out at 4K 60 frames per second. So all the basic frame rates, 4K 24, 25, and 30, as well as 50 and 60 frames per second. And it is supposed to be able to do 10-bit 422. Not a surprise, not at $2,000. However, we don't know if that's internal or external, but here in 2023, if it doesn't do internal, I'll be shaking my head on announcement day. And in terms of S-Cinetone, yes, S-Log2 and S-Log3, no mention at this point. But again, at $2,000 not to be able to shoot log, I'd be really surprised. Now this shouldn't be a surprise. The A7CR is going to cost more than the A7C II. Now I don't know the exact pricing, but we're told that these cameras are around $2,000 to $2,500. So if I was a betting man, I would say that the Sony A7C II would be around $2,000, and the Sony A7CR wouldn't be much more than about $2,499. And why do I suggest that when it's got a lot of powerful capabilities? Well, for one thing, it's got a single card slot, and that is a bit of a downer. Even at $2,000, there's no reason why a camera like this shouldn't have dual card slots, even if they are just SD card slots and not the dual card slots that Sony normally puts in their where they put it in their camera. So SD cards as well as CF Express Type A can both go in the same slot. I would have given them 2 card slots and just say, hey, you know what? You're limiting it to just V30, V60, or V90 cards. But I can see this is what really separates this camera, the A7CR, from the Sony a7R5, a camera that costs $38.99. Certainly not cheap. So even if it costs $24.99 with a single card slot, it really kind of eliminates it for pro use. But for everybody else that looked at these pro cameras and said that's way out of reach, well, if you're willing to sacrifice redundancy, which a lot of cameras at $2,000 and less do have a single card slot, well, you've got a pretty impressive camera, although it's going to be a small body, so I wouldn't be surprised if both of these two cameras do have some sort of, well, overheating limits. The announcement is supposed to take place on August the 29th, but we don't have a time. And once we have a time, I'm going to go ahead and book a live stream to start 1 hour before the announcement, where I'm going to have live guests. We're going to talk about the latest Sony leaks on the A7C II, the A7CR, what we would do if we were the president of Sony, and then we're going to cover the announcement live and then talk about how close our expectations are to the actuals announced at that event. So all this happening on August the 29th. You might have noticed for the better part of this video that I have smart pre-order links to B&H and Adorama for the Sony a7C II as well as the a7CR. And I do make a note here that these will be available. They'll function once the embargo's been lifted. So why do I have them here? Well, to save you time. You see, we're expecting body alone for both cameras. We're expecting kits for both cameras. And of course, Adorama and B&H quite often will do their own packages where they'll take a camera, they'll give you a choice of multiple lenses, they'll throw in a camera bag, cleaner, they'll throw in cloths, they'll throw in memory cards, all this stuff, various different kit packages. So for both of these two cameras, we could have as many as 5, 6, 7, or even more different packages. So by copying down these smart pre-order links, once the embargo's lifted, you can put these in your browser, and I would do that now. Go ahead, put them in your browser, and add them to your bookmarks, because as soon as the embargo's lifted, you can see every single kit package available, the price, and what it's going to do essentially is save you time. It might only save you 5 or 10 seconds, but that's going to get you further up in the queue, so you can get your camera before anybody else. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest news and rumors concerning the Sony a7C II, the a7CR, as well as the lens, the 16 to 35 millimeter that's supposed to be announced on August the 29th, then go ahead and subscribe, but make sure you also choose all notifications. And for all minor news and rumors, for all those news stories that aren't quite big enough to have their own separate video, like this morning, before I published this video, I tweeted out saying, hey, 8K on the Sony a7CR, it's not going to happen. So for all those news stories that aren't quite, well, big enough to have their own separate video, follow me on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, it's now called X, so that way you can stay up to date on all the latest camera gear news and rumors. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention, if you do use my pre-order links down below, I do get anywhere from 2 to 6% back, and that goes towards supporting the channel. However, I do believe very strongly in supporting local camera stores. If you do have a local camera store in your area, or if you're shopping from Canada, I highly recommend Downtown Camera. Talk to Patrick. I'm not getting paid to say this. I've been using Patrick for several years. The guy, he always, even before I had this channel, he always gave me a discount off gear, so I've always appreciated that. But local camera stores, they need your business. And I won't get any special favor status, but it'll make me feel good if you do purchase from your local camera store, because in today's economy with a shrinking camera market, supporting your local camera store supports local jobs. And I'm all in favor of that. And it also helps keep competition on the big guys, because if we lose all the small camera stores, what's going to happen with competition? But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.